We will start with an update on activities regarding real-world evidence and Darwin. And we have with us Andres Seget, who is the project manager for DARWIN EU. He's project manager in data analytics and methods task force. Unfortunately, Aldo Maggioni could not join, so he was going to join virtually, but he's not able to do so. And then we have in person Elizabeth Broom, who is a patient representative, as you well know, but who is actively contributing to this initiative. So thank you both of you, and I give the floor to Andre first.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to update you today. I think there should be a presentation in the system. Perfect. And I will share it with my colleague Kelly, who I think will join us for later in the session. So we wanted to give you a more rounded update on all the real-world evidence activities which are happening as we speak, and this will of course include the developments in DARWIN EU. So I can move the slides, I think. Yes, perfect. So we would have told you in previous updates that the medicines regulators' vision until 2025 is to really enable the use of real-world evidence in all the decisions we take on medicines and establish its value. And this will be across a number of use cases, by which we mean at the development stage, during authorization, and in the post-marketing supervision. So any questions related to the disease epidemiology, standards of care, treatment patterns, safety endpoints such as etiological studies can be performed. So we're very much working on that, and 2025, when we wrote that vision, seemed like quite some time away, but it's very much knocking on the door now. So we're working in 3 different pathways in producing that real-world evidence, and one of them, the first on the left, is by the analysis of healthcare data to which we have access via licensing, so in-house. My colleagues, some of the analysts in the real-world evidence team can access them, and these are mostly primary care records from 6 countries. And we are working to add some hospital data as well, because many medicines are only given in the secondary settings. Then the middle column here, the DARWIN EU, which I will spend probably the major part of my update telling you about, is a network which is federated and contains 10 data partners, and we expect to grow it with 10 extra every year. On the right-hand side then, my colleague Kelly will tell you about the framework contract studies, by which we have overall platform agreements, framework agreements with academic researchers who have their own access to data sources, and it's nearly 60 sources from 21 countries on whom we can draw for particular study requests, so we can purvey a study when there's the need. And these, of course, are much more flexible in terms of what we can ask, because we really can leverage the wide expertise and the sources of data across the EU, but they do tend to take much longer than all the other studies. So the framework contract study is normally upwards of a year. Plus, of course, this is just what we're doing within the building here. There are also other regulatory authorities across the continent who have access to their own data or to other data available to them, and they perform their real-world evidence. And this is in addition to all the studies performed by the companies and developers. So just to say where we start, maybe, is the review of the real-world evidence studies we've produced hitherto. And you may have seen the announcement recently with the real-world evidence experience report, which was published last week, together with the associate press release. And it's got a 2-pager info sheet if you're looking for a quick synopsis of what we've done. So this summarizes the experience with approximately 60 studies, and mostly with the first of the 3 pathways, so the in-house studies, because DARWIN EU has just been in its infancy. And I invite you to look at the info sheet in the report. So let's move to DARWIN EU now. So this is what very close to my heart, and certainly keeping me busy Monday to Friday every week. So as I said, this is a federated network of data, expertise, and services to support medicines regulation and our decision-making with real-world evidence based on the analysis of healthcare data that already is collected. Important to note is that in the federated model, the data stays local, so we don't transfer the data from the original holders, the data partners, and they in fact execute the analysis locally and only provide us with the aggregated results. And we also use the common data model, which is the OMOP common data model, and this hugely simplifies the logistics because we can access all the data partners with the same analytical code, and this also reduces the timelines and increases the consistency of the results. So it seems fairly complex, but the network's operated by a coordination center. This is the Erasmus University Medical Center in Rotterdam, and they have a number of their own subcontractors. They contract the data partners currently with individual agreements, and in the future we also expect to use the European Health Data Space as it's put into reality. The EMA is the entry point here, supervises and delivers the network for standards and for the contact and for onboarding of the data partners, but we also serve to initiate the studies on behalf of the medicines regulators. So all the EMA's committees, the network of national competent authorities, etc. I said we have 10 data partners, and these are them. We also look at onboarding 10 extra every additional year. So currently we have 8 countries represented with approximately 26 million active patients, and these are a mix of primary, secondary, specialist care, and sometimes more than one of these settings, where we might have primary and hospital data, for example. Noteworthy are 2 which are slightly more specialist than that. So that's number 9, the Dutch Cancer Registry, which is nationwide, and the number 7, the Biobank from Estonia, which on top of genomic data also contains primary, specialist, and secondary care data. So biobanks certainly something we're interested in developing further, especially when they're linked with clinical data. So when we foresee the use of real-world evidence, as I mentioned, is across the product's lifecycle. So this very much forays into the activities of any of the EMA's committees and working parties. And it could be in the pre-authorization phase, for example, to grant the orphan designation or to help with the planning of the pediatric development, establishing the feasibility counts, for example, for the disease occurrence in children, so to understand whether any trials in this area are meaningful and going to be successful. Certainly then at the evaluation, any points of relating to the disease, to the standards of care, to the risks of the standards of care, or to any safety questions which might already be occurring with the rest of class, and the same in post-authorization. So where we are with DARWIN EU, we are progressing very much to plan, and I'm very pleased to tell you that this is, of course, with thanks to the team at the EMA and with the Coordination Center and all the committee liaisons and the DARWIN EU Advisory Board, indeed, which has multi-stakeholder representation. So currently we're focusing on growing the network, so looking at the new data partners onboarding and on increasing the volume of the studies to also test the use cases and also work further on the analytical pipelines and the analytical code. These are pivotal in our growth towards the higher capacity of studies because they can be reused. So once we, for example, perform the drug utilization study pattern or the disease epidemiology study analytical type, we will certainly be able to reuse that in the future. We update the list of conditions or the list of the outcomes of interest, and this hugely reduces the time. So you'll see in the green highlight, this year we expect 16 studies or so, but next year this grows to 72. And here we really need to look at leveraging the common data model, the standardized analytics, the pre-prepared analytical code, automate some of the work on the protocols such that we can drive down the time per study and deliver the higher volume. You may have also seen some of the publicity which has come through the establishment in the last 18 months with the announcements relating to the onboarding of data partners and to the completion of the first studies, and we will certainly keep informing all stakeholders to that end. Another of the communication and transparency activities was the launch of the website of the DARWIN EU Coordination Center. This contains a large amount of information relating to the network itself, to the Coordination Center, but also to the processes for the study conduct and the list of the studies and the standardized analysis catalog. So on these 2 slides, I'm going to briefly introduce the catalog, which builds the analytical types according to the types of the use case and types of the epidemiological methods. So off the shelf are studies which use really very much the standardized analysis, so we can predefine what's going to be analyzed in what way and what are the standard outputs. So when we say patient level characterization, we mean to look at a certain cohort of patients and look at the characteristics either at entry or over time, for example, what are the outcomes. Similarly, the population level analyses and for disease epidemiology studies, for example. We also have complex studies to be performed via the network, so this doesn't have to be also straightforward, which are studies where we need to work a little bit more on the protocol to specify the outcomes and exposures of interest, any confounders to adjust for, possible effect modifiers to account in the analysis, and specify the methods very clearly what's going to be done. So these would be the usual pharmacoepidemiological studies where we look at either safety endpoints, for example, comparative analyses, but also it could be effectiveness studies and the impact of regulatory decisions. And you can certainly consult the catalog in more detail. Now, that's not the only place where we've got information about studies. We also display all the available study protocols and reports via the EU Pass register. So these are the links in blue on this slide. And to illustrate it on the 4 studies which have so far been initiated and completed, and also noting that this year we will have a number of collaborative studies in addition to that. So far, which has helped us in establishing the analytical packages, was a disease epidemiology study, which was on a number of rare blood cancers, a drug utilization study related to a particular safety concern, so the use of valproate in women of childbearing potential, and the drug utilization of antibiotics, which is to support the work on antimicrobial resistance. So there we had a long list of antibiotics looking over 10 years, and I have a visual to show you just on the next slide. Lastly, we had a complex study looking at the all-cause mortality in patients with severe asthma. This is to support that disease area and all the product portfolio for authorization in this domain. So the links will contain more details. All the analytical methods, exposures, definitions will be defined in the study protocols, and the study report, once reviewed and once assessed by the regulatory network, will also be made available. The last note I'd like to make is that we also have Shiny apps for the kind of customized display of the results, because many of these studies will have a lot of results, tables, charts, and users may wish to visualize that differently, so the Shiny apps allow exactly that. So have a look at that EU Pass register entry and you'll see all the details. So just to introduce 1 or 2 visuals from the completed studies, this is the disease epidemiology for 6 conditions. So each row is one of the hematological cancers. And the colors of the dots represent the 5 data partners we had included in the federated analysis. So the common data model really enables that. And we then bring the results together into a sort of easiest to digest interpretation and visualization. And we have 3 columns because 3 different measures of prevalence were used in this study. So if you look at the column on the right, the complete prevalence, you'll see how this changes over time between 2010 and 2022. And for most of the conditions, there's a slight increase upwards. For some, it's much more pronounced than others. Prevalence, of course, being also related to survival. So it might be driven not only by incidence, but also of survival and improving availability and efficacy of treatments. You also see that this is from 5 countries where we had included in the analysis, and the results are very, very consistent across them. There is, of course, some variability because either recording practices or incidence or the treatment accessibility may differ, but overall the concordance is very, very close. So we're between, say, 0 and 2 per 10,000 or elsewhere between 3 and 5 per 10,000. So I think that's very, very good, and this really is one of the benefits of the federated analysis. In the other visual, I'm showing you the incidence rate of use of antibiotics, this time azithromycin, in 6 databases, and again, they're distinguished by colors, and you'll see how the trends can be monitored over time. Again, it's over a 10-year period in a number of countries, and we've done that for, I think, 70 antibiotics or so. So please have a look at the EU Pass register entries. It wasn't limited to per substance comparisons. We've also looked at some of the class level overall patterns, and we've seen, for example, very interesting findings here with macrolides, where there's a U-shape association that's higher use in the younger age groups, probably related to childhood infections, things like otitis, bronchitis, and maybe some skin infections, and then sort of dipping down in young adults and in midlife, and again picking up later with increasing age. Last of the studies I haven't yet spoken about is the valproate use in women up to 55. And here again, we had 6 data partners, and you'll see how over time the incidence goes very much down in all the data partners. It's more pronounced when it had been higher initially. This, of course, follows close regulatory attention to this topic and this population, with risk minimization measures being introduced because of the risks of use during pregnancy. So then, what's currently cooking are some studies I'd like to inform you about. And once the severe asthma study, which I've previously mentioned, that's being currently finalized, and we'll be reporting that as soon as we can. We then have the characterization of patients with multiple myeloma in terms of treatments and their survival. This is in collaboration with the bodies of HTA and PAES domain. And it will include, obviously, looking at the treatments, looking at the survival analysis, and we should have the protocol published shortly. Next, the work on COVID-19 vaccines is still not over, and we are looking at the effectiveness of these vaccines with the number of severe outcomes, which would be documented in healthcare data, but also looking at some markers of long COVID, and this is in collaboration with the ECDC and the EMA's and ECDC's vaccine monitoring platform. Next is looking again closer to home, and one of the initial applications assessed by the CHMP for a combination of two substances for pulmonary hypertension and understanding how frequently this is already done in clinical practice, how often they're co-prescribed. Next, we've got another real world inspired research question on the use of an antibiotic, erythromycin, as a prokinetic for its prokinetic properties, especially in critical care. Moving then to another collaboration on where else we could use real-world evidence and really establish its value. And that's in anticipation of the European Health Data Space. One of the 5 use cases which was selected in support of this piece of legislation is the coagulopathy of COVID-19 infection, or in people who had been vaccinated. And this is conducted partly in DARWIN EU with the common data model, but in addition in 5 other countries in raw data, not in the common data model, to really test how the infrastructure for healthcare data can be brought together and how the results could be analyzed and interpreted when they come from various formats. There might, of course, be some data sources who will never complete the conversion to the common data model simply because they're highly specialized, such as some disease registries, or because it's not feasible for them for logistics or for the cost or the time that needs to go in. And to finish, we have 2 use cases related to the opioids. So naloxone for the opioid overdose reversal and its drug utilization, and the drug utilization prescriptions, duration of treatment, repeat prescriptions of opioids from the relevant ATC code. So again, this will include all the opioid medicines to monitor this topic. This is, of course, a global public health issue, probably more so in North America and elsewhere than in the EU, but certainly we will be looking at that, and with the federated model include several countries' data to have a closer picture. So that completes the DARWIN EU part. We could continue now with the framework contracts. I think Kelly should be on the call. Kelly, so over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Andre. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, very well. Please go ahead.
Perfect. So sorry for not being able to be with you in the room today. My name is Kelly Plushker, and I work with Andre in the real world evidence workstream in the data analytics and methods task force at EMA. And we have, so Andre has presented to you 2 of the 3 pathways for EMA to generate real world evidence. So I'm going now to present to you the last pathway, which are the studies procured through the EMA framework contract. And basically, EMA has 5 type of contracts with research organizations, and here we are talking about the lot 5, which allows us to perform studies, pharmacoepidemiology studies on medicine. And within this lot 5, we have a contract with 8 research organizations and academic institutes. And this provides us with the opportunity to access a wide network of data sources, nearly 60 data sources across 21 EU countries. And it allows us to leverage external scientific expertise. Next slide, please. So what is the current process at EMA for funding studies? And sorry, because I'm a bit sorry about that. So basically, once we identify a research question, so usually the research question comes from our scientific committees. So once we have identified the research question, we will draft technical specifications. And what does that mean? So these technical specifications are basically a large document where we explain the rationale for funding a study. We present the research questions as well as any additional requirements we may have, for example, the use of a particular type of data source, the use of data from a particular country, so geographical coverage. We present the deliverables that we want to get, as well as the timelines for these deliverables to be sent to us. So we will prepare this document together in consultation with the scientific committee that is requesting the study. And once this is ready, we will send this technical specification to the 8 research organizations with which we have a contract. And each of them will have the opportunity to consider whether they want to send us a tender proposal, so a study proposal. Once we have received all these proposals, we will internally evaluate them. So we have internally an evaluation committee. And once we have evaluated all these tenders, we will award a decision. So this means that we have identified a research organization with which we can sign a contract to perform the study. And usually this takes about 2 to 3 months. So 2 months if we are quite quick. So once we have a research organization with which we have signed a contract, the study can start. So this takes approximately 12 to 18 months, depending on the study. Once the study starts, the research organization conducts the study, then they will send us the research results, as well as a report, which we will evaluate, and then we'll send this report to the committee that requested the study in order to consider how to include these results within the regulatory decision making of medicine. So next slide, please. So this is an example I wanted to flag to you. As you can see, it has been posted in the EU PASS register. I think it's a good example because it's about a rare disease. It's also a study that we are performing on registry data using patient-reported outcome. I think you can click maybe one more or twice possibly. Yeah. So it's a study to describe the natural history of spinal muscular atrophy. We want to also evaluate the SMA care management and disease progression over time in view of the 3 therapeutic so medicines that have been authorized over the last few years, including the gene therapy Zolgensma. And this is a study that we are currently performing with Etienne. So Etienne is the research organization with which we have signed a contract to perform the study. And Etienne is very closely collaborating with TreatNMD to access data from 7 registries, including patient registries and clinical registries. So this is only one example, and I think, Andre, you have highlighted many other examples that you can find in the EU PASS, also including all the studies we've conducted on COVID-19 over the last few years. Next slide. Thank you. So speaking about registries, I've been asked today to give you a little update on the EMA priority topics on registries for the next few years. As you can see here on the screen, there are a few priority topics that have been identified together with experts from the EMA HMA Patient Registry Initiative. And the first priority topic is really to leverage the existing CHMP guideline on registry-based study, which was adopted and published on the EMA website in October 2021, and which I think I came to present in the past to the working group. Basically, the objective of this guideline is really to, sorry, to provide key recommendation on methodological and operational aspects of the planning and the conduct of registry-based study. And the target audience here is mainly marketing authorization applicants and marketing authorization holders, as well as anybody intending to use patient registry to conduct studies for regulatory purposes. And very important to note as well is that this guideline has an annex that outline aspects considered good regulatory practice when developing and maintaining or managing patient registries. So that's why this guideline is also relevant to other type of stakeholders, such as registry holders, patients, and healthcare professionals, and anybody involved in the maintenance of patient registries or registries. And this guideline is actually really the basis of all our work on registries. So that's why it's very important to make sure that all stakeholders are aware. And just a last note on this is that it was really developed based on the experience that we've acquired from various disease registry workshops we've organized in the past, as well as 2 very substantial public consultations. So quite important document that we need to make sure that is integrated in the processes of various stakeholders. Another priority topic is to assess the needs for further guidance on registries, and this will be obviously performed or done together with a methodology working party. We want to better understand barriers to data access and collaborations, because we've identified some limitations here in terms of use of registries, sometimes because of collaborations that are not very smooth. We want to ensure the promotion of the data quality and discoverability of real-world data sources. And over the past 2 days, we've had a very fruitful workshop on real-world data quality and real-world evidence in decision-making that we hope that the output will really serve in terms of drafting a deep dive annex to the data quality framework developed already last year. We want as well to look at the output of a workshop that was performed, that was organized in April on the qualification procedures, looking more specifically at the qualification procedure on registries and see what are the action points here. And beginning of next year, we will also have a multi-stakeholders workshop on registries. So yeah, very interesting for patient and healthcare professionals to participate here. I think you can click once more. Thank you. So what are the direct actions we want to take in order to address all these priority topics? So in order to address the 3 first priority topics, we have conducted over the last few weeks a survey on the guideline on registry-based studies in order to assess the awareness on the document of our stakeholders, to identify specific topics that may require clarification, and also to understand training needs. So basically, the survey the results of the survey will really inform the needs, the content, and the format of stakeholder communication and engagement, as well as training on the guideline. So we hope, we would like to work with you in order to develop such communication tools. We are planning maybe to organize webinars about the guideline and any topics on registries that are related to the guideline. Maybe we want to develop educational videos with concrete use cases, very, very short videos for colleagues to understand what's the guideline, how it can be practically integrated in the process for regulatory decision-making, etc. And also develop a Q&A document on the guideline that may provide clarity on some of the aspects of the guidance. I think you have been consulted on the data quality framework once it was published for consultation last year. We obviously want to continue involving you in the development of this document, especially on the annex to this data quality framework, which will be specific to data, real-world data quality, as well as we want to involve you or engage with you the population of the EMA catalog once it is available on the EMA website beginning of next year. Obviously the patient angle and patient experience data will be a central theme of the workshop that we'll organize next year, and we'll be happy to work with a few of you in order to put together a nice program for that. Next slide. So I just have 2 slides on the main results of a survey on the guideline of registry-based study. So we launched it in May, sorry, for 3 weeks, and we received 111 responses. As you can see here, I'm glad to say that more than 3/4 of our stakeholders are aware about the guideline, but still 24% are not. So we have some work to do in terms of communication and engagement. And on the right-hand side, you see how the results are divided by stakeholders type. And obviously from the main target audience, these are aware about the document. But when we combine together the responses from patients and healthcare professionals together, actually there is less awareness here. So we really have to work together to change that. Next slide. Thank you. And we also had a question in the survey to know what our stakeholders think are the priority topics for this workshop I was talking about a bit earlier. And as you can see on the screen here, very clear that colleagues want to speak about the fitness for purpose of registries. So identifying the right research questions that can be answered properly by registries. Also establishing the value of registries, data discoverability, data quality, as I mentioned as well earlier, where we want to consult and involve more patient and healthcare professionals. And also very interesting, the feedback from patients on the need to discuss patient experience data, which is obviously in line with our research, regulatory research science strategy, in order to establish value of this kind of data and to make sure that patients' input and healthcare professional input are also really integrated into our decision making. So that will be a central theme of our workshop. And just I forgot to mention on the slide with all the actions, all these actions are actually part of the patient experience data work plan from the EMA community, which I think maybe Juan and colleagues might have already presented to you or will present to you in the future. But bottom line is that it's really crucial for us to involve you in order to ensure that we collect all your needs, and in order to ensure that we manage to integrate all your input as a main component for regulatory decision making. Next slide. Yeah, so just take home messages. So patient and healthcare professional obviously are the end users of the medicine, so they know very well the medicines. They are at the center of their use, and also they know very well their disease, their conditions. So the patients, healthcare professionals are instrumental in optimizing medicines development and regulatory decision making. So we really need to involve you. And this is in line with our regulatory science strategy, as I said earlier. We need to understand the needs in terms of training. We need to make sure we consult and integrate your input into our deliverables. And this will help us to identify challenges, opportunities, gaps that we need to work on in order to ensure we establish value of PED for regulatory purposes. And in terms of priority topics on registries, I'd be happy to launch a call for volunteers to work together on developing patient communication and engagement strategy regarding the guideline, and maybe any other topics you think we would need to promote more on the use of registries to your stakeholders, and also in the preparation of the workshop that will take place in Q1 next year. I think that was my last slide, and sorry again for my voice. Thank you.